It's fine, completely fine.
Fine? Okay, if you are fine, I'm fine.
So it's time, sir. Mr. Krishna Kumar, we can start.
Yeah. Welcome to this policy seminar. The webinar is on hand-holding MSMEs back to recovery. Hello. Hand-holding MSMEs back to recovery. Introduction to this, we are basically having with us today, joining us is Santosh Mehrotra, who is Professor of Economics at Jawaharlal Nehru University. We have Professor Charan Singh, formerly professor at IIM, and he's now the director of eGrowth Foundation. We have from the Vadhwani Foundation, Samir Sate, who carries with him experience with respect to corporate mentoring of MSMEs. We have representatives of the MSMEs, Mr. Anil Bhardwaj, who is Secretary General of FISME, K. Raghunathan, formerly President of AIMO, and currently member of the Central Board of Trustees of EPFO. He carries within 35 years of experience as a small-scale industrialist. And we also have very happy to have with us Ms. Chitra Ella, who is from Sydney, who is general manager at Sydney, who carries with her years of experience as a banker. Today, when we discuss here, let me just start off with a very small issue relating to the MSMEs, the way forward. This particular discussion comes in the context of the recent initiatives that the government has taken with respect to upscaling the activities of this particular sector, which has been not doing very well due to multiple reasons, starting from the global slowdown in 2008, which later had another rupture in the form of demonetization. And yet again, we basically had the problem of, yet again, now we have the problem of COVID. All of these things together had resulted in the particular sector of MSMEs facing severe challenge. But contributing at least 40%, at least significantly to the GDP of our country, and almost 1/3 of the GDP of our country is being contributed by the MSMEs. And remember that of the 7% of the GDP equivalent of the manufacturing output is also being produced by the MSME sector. The role played by this sector is phenomenal. And here we have with us a good panel of discussants who will take us through the route. And let us basically have on board Anil Bhardwaj. Let us hear from him as to whether the MSMEs are happy with the new policy initiatives from the part of the government.
Thanks for having me. I think, as you rightly said, that MSME sector is one of the sectors that has been affected very badly through this pandemic. Earlier also, they have been going through the stress already after demonetization and introduction of GST. And they were also having a lot of pressure on their cash, on the liquidity. So this was pre-COVID. And due to sudden lockdown for 2-3 months, complete, you can say, eradication of revenue and or reduction in revenue, and leading to severe liquidity crisis. And that posed a question of solvency for a large number of MSMEs. So in that context, that government came out with 4 major initiatives, particularly, as you know, a loan bonanza of 3 lakh crore rupees, which was addressed, or which is addressed to people who are currently having a loan, outstanding loan with the banks. So the first condition is that, first of all, you should be having a running loan, and you will get 20% of that outstanding loan without collateral for the next 4 years. So naturally, this initiative, although laudable and useful for quite a number of MSMEs, but it caters to only those MSMEs which are currently having access to institutional funds, and that number is barely 7 to 8% of the total MSME sector. Second, there were other issues like stress fund, and then fund of funds for the startups. I would not like to comment on them because there is hardly anything in the public domain about these two initiatives. But I would like to spend, if you allow me, a couple of minutes on the initiative of 200 crore rupees or tenders below 200 crore rupees that will not be now available for the global competition. That means there will not be competition from the global players, and they are currently would be earmarked for the domestic players only. The catch
Which
here
Mr.
is,
Which Mr. Bharadwaj was one of the most important issues which you had raised with the Prime Minister in the meeting which you had.
yes, that's right. And but unfortunately, there is also a caveat in this. And the caveat is this: that currently, when it was announced as part of the MSME package, uh, the message was as if this 200 crore rupees or tenders below 200 crore rupees are earmarked for the MSME sector. But that is not the case. Now, these are open to all Indian companies. Indian companies means also all the multinational companies that are registered in India. They are also Indian companies. So, and we have seen suddenly after that a spate of tenders where Indian MSMEs have been specifically excluded through a web of pre-qualification criteria, and now they are sitting pretty. The multinational companies are sitting pretty in India during this, you can say, dispensation, that they do not have any global competition, and they have only competition within themselves here. And usually there are only 2 or 3 players in each segment. So that
Let
would
me
allow them to raise profits, but exclude MSMEs.
let me bring him K. Raghunathan to comment on what the FISME Director General had said. K. Raghu, are you there?
Good evening, everybody, and nice to be part of the show. Okay, the first question is, how are the MSMEs feeling? I think let me address that from my own perspective of having done the study with them and survey with them, which might add it up to the remarks of Mr. Bharadwaj. And in my opinion, the MSME can be easily equated to a human body. When I say human body, the brain is obviously the profitability. The heart is the entrepreneur and the owner. The hands are the employees. The legs are the customers because we chase them and we run after them. And obviously the blood of the human body is the finance, and the eyes is the competition. The ears are the technology vision. If you take all this, suddenly COVID has landed us into an accident. The accident is for everybody. All of us are taken aback. All of us didn't know how to react. It took us for a while to recover from all the shock what we had gone through with the lockdown conditions. Now, some in the coach were already dead. Some in the coach were critical. Some in the coach is less critical. Some are unhurted. Now, the government at this moment has only given a first aid at the accident site. That was during the COVID. What is more needed is there are entrepreneurs who are dead or who are not able to continue further. As per the survey, 35% of the entrepreneurs want to close down their operation, but they are still willing to donate their organs. We need to take the help from them and make sure their infrastructure, their knowledge, their capabilities are further continuously in use and given them a honorable exit. And there are people who are critically ill. They need the mask and the ventilators to make them come out of it from the dead. And these are all part of the necessities from the government. The loan scheme what has been announced has not taken off even after 30 days. And hardly about 7 to 8% is a beneficiary as on today, on the 30th day. Banks say they have money, no takers, and the entrepreneurs say they have needs but no givers, and there seems to be a cup and a gap between the cup and the lid.
Yeah, as Raghu, that brings us to an important issue as to whether the efforts which has been put forward by the government has been more supply side in nature rather than addressing the issue of demand. Therein, shouldn't we bring, should Dr. Santosh Mehrotra respond to it? Sir Santosh Mehrotra, Professor Mehrotra.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes, yeah.
I think the answer to your question is in the question. I think you put your finger on it, and in a sense, both Anil and Raghu have also answered that question. That 90% of this 21 lakh crores is in the form of so-called loans, bank guarantees, and we've already heard some of the story about that, and liquidity, while 1% of GDP is in the form of fiscal stimulus. And what is needed at this point for the MSMEs to be able to revive is demand. And in the absence of a fiscal stimulus, you're not going to revive demand. We don't understand what the logic of the government is. And I just want to put this in context. I was part of the government in the Planning Commission when we were designing the response to the 2008 global economic crisis. The 2008 global economic crisis was hardly a crisis compared to what we are facing. This is the worst disaster that our economy has faced in the history of our country since 1973. Then the fiscal response was somewhere between 3 and 4% of GDP. Now, with a crisis which is much worse, we have a fiscal response of 1% to GDP. What we need is money being put in the hands of people. And at the very least, apart from the Manrega increase, on which there is already an increase in demand, we need cash transfers. I have done a paper on this. It's about to come out as an ICRIER occasional paper. I've shared it with Dr. Rajiv Kumar. We need to put a cash transfer for something like 70% of the households. PM Kisan doesn't do it for us. I'm sorry. PM Kisan is a highly exclusionary instrument. It excludes tenant farmers, landless labor, it excludes the non-farm poor, it excludes the urban, and even within PM Kisan, household, if it has split into two families, if there are two brothers, each of them gets the PM Kisan. So this is regressive beyond belief. Anyway, bottom line is, I think we need a fiscal stimulus. And if we don't get it, the economy is careening downwards, and the government's fiscal deficit, which is what it is worried about, will probably go out of control in any case, because incomes will not grow, tax revenues will not happen, the government will have to borrow in any case. I'll stop.
Professor Mehrotra, let me take Professor Charan Singh on board and request him to comment on something like this, that we cannot now think in terms of generating employment in any other sectors other than in the non-farm sector. But the story of India's is that there has been a stagnant manufacturing sector output of around 16 to 18% since 80s. So which means that we have not changed much. Whereas the additions every year to the labor force has been on such an increase that it's impossible to sustain employment creation without trying to specifically cater to these sectors. In fact, if you look the UN report with respect to manufacturing value added, we find that China leads it with 28% of the value added, as against which you basically have the value added of India being as low as 2%. We basically have India's percentage in the global value added being just 2%, whereas that of China's is as high as 20.4%. So what do you think should be the policy option which the government should have? And along with it, let us also see the other part of the story, which again I'm sharing a slide with you, that the bilateral trade balance of India with China, by virtue of our being part of a number of free trade areas, as well as in the name of hanging on to different global value chain network of production, has been deteriorating substantially from 2000 to 2018. In fact, it has inched close to $60 billion of bilateral trade deficit. There have been studies by Dr. Bijoti Dutta, Dr. Smita Francis, and others with respect to the huge import of electronics products occurring into our country, even hurting the competitiveness of our local industry or ability of our local industry to thrive. I would like Professor Charan Singh to give his comments in this particular regard.
Professor Krishna, thanks for inviting me and thanks for having me on the panel. It's a very illustrious panel and I'm going to learn a lot on this. But before I go to the specific question that you have posed for me, I want to share some thoughts, if you don't mind. And those are the thoughts which you have already asked the panelist earlier, and I had a view on it. You are right, the government has announced a package, and the package probably has not reached the MSMEs, or at least not reached the MSMEs the way the government would like it. Now, the issue that I have in mind is that when anyone is in a crisis, the MSMEs are in a crisis because of COVID, nobody would like to take loan. What people don't mind is a grant. On one hand, in a country like America, which laid off people and 40 million people are on the unemployment payroll, in our country, the Prime Minister made an announcement and most of the MSMEs did not lay off people, but now had to pay the salaries, had to pay the rent, the electricity bill, and therefore no production, but cost as usual obviously is going to strain the MSMEs. Now, yes, moratorium has been announced and some rope has been given to the MSMEs, but my feeling is this is not going to be sufficient. That is why in one of my policy notes that I contributed, I said we need something like an escrow account. How would the escrow account work? The government is giving direct benefit transfers to many people, some ladies and some others. The government knows the MSMEs, of course, those which are listed and which have a bank account. The government could say your monthly rental value, your electricity bill, and your salary will be taken care by us. If not 100%, say 50% will be taken care by us. So once you transfer that money under the direct benefit transfer to the MSMEs, the stress at the MSME level is much reduced. Does the government have so much money? I would like to invite the view to the fact that tax to GDP ratio in our country has never exceeded 18%. In advanced countries which we like to compare ourselves with, it is above 30%. In some countries above 36, in rare countries above 40. Now they have the wherewithal, they have the resilience, they have the fiscal space. At this part of the juncture, at this time of the economy, the government could have given this sort of escrow account arrangement and then said, once you start production, through the escrow account, the amount that has been given to you, no rate of interest, start giving us back within a year of your production resuming. I think that would have been better, or some out of the box things like this should have been better. Now coming to the specific question that you are raising, my own feeling is that whatever said and done, the future of the country is in MSMEs. 6 crore of them, employing 12 crore people, is the second largest employer after agriculture. So therefore, government jobs, private sector jobs given artificial intelligence, as well as machine learning are not going to increase commensurate with the demographics that we have. The only place where we will be able to absorb the teeming millions is MSMEs. MSMEs are already contributing significant amount in the exports as well as GDP, and you have shown that that amount has to increase further. The industry to GDP ratio has also to improve further, and that's the whole motto of Make in India. How do we go about doing it now? That is the issue. The fact is well recognized. My own reading is we will have to again think out of the way, and the traditional method will not follow. We have to swing into action, bring in NABARD, bring in SIDBI, and the commercial banks. We
Yeah,
will have
I
to.
think here we should start hearing from the Sydney person so that we can continue also to respond to her. Can we have Chitra Elad, to whom we would like to ask as to what's the Sydney's response? Because Sydney has been given this mandate towards catering to the small industrial requirements of finance. And we find that countrywide they have a loan portfolio of around 10,000 crores, other than the huge amount of refinancing which it does for different industries of the small scale industrial nature. But often one comes across a big constraint under which the city works. That is, the refinancing is being provided by Sydney to only those banks whose gross non-performing assets is below a particular level. And Sydney also provides refinancing only to microfinance institutions, of which the percentage, that is, if they do not have a credit rating or a ranking of BBB minus, they do not provide facilities in the form of refinancing. Don't you think that this, given that there is a COVID risk increase in the economy, these sorts of ratios would be on the unfavorable side, and that actually constrains or restrains Sydney from extending credit? Can Ms. Chitra from Sydney respond to the same?
At the outset, thank you, Policy Circle. I think it's a great honor to be amongst all of you. And I come from a very small portion of that 10,000 crore where we are working on the field, trying to help our MSME clients and handling the South and the Kerala part of the country. And the last 1 month, I would personally say has been very, very challenging because we have been directly in touch with almost all our customers and trying to understand the problems that they're facing, the viewpoints that they have. And I agree with Mr. Charan Singh when he said that certain things could have been done in a very simplistic manner. Sir, in a very lay person's way, like I'm not a academic like all of you are, but I would have thought that COVID was a great opportunity for Indian banking to directly extend a 1-year moratorium without charging the monthly, let's say, the dues which we compute, the way we compute as bankers. That itself would have actually eased the MSMEs to a great extent. I still don't understand why it was three months that we took to do it. That 1-year extension would have been good enough. Now, coming to the next point, that to extend the 20% to everybody, we still have time till October 30th to complete the process. And like Mr. Charan Singh again said, he said not everybody is very keen to draw the money when they don't know where the business is actually going to go. They're all sitting on capexes. Like in South, we have a huge problem of not having the labor coming back from the various centers where they have migrated. So many of our customers particularly are struggling without the labor. They're all operating at 30-40%, and some of them have managed to deploy the local available labor, and they're working at 60-70%. Yet, as a Tamil Nadu, if I were to ask, consider it as a state, I don't know where auto and electronics is going to go from now. I don't know how the demand is going to pan out for the vehicles, for the entire sector, and how employment is going to pan out even amongst the various sectors which drive these products. So the first thing is, from an industry perspective, is demand. And my sector in this part of the country is already grappling with it. They're trying to understand. They have somehow managed till now. Having said that, that is one aspect of direct lending which we do, which I said the 10,000 crore. We have, I must say that only 53% of my customer base has asked for this 20% assistance. It shows the fear that they have for not borrowing more at this time. So that is one aspect. Coming to the refinance which you were talking about, surely SIDBI extends refinance to all banks, sir. We have no problems, and cooperative banks, NABARD is lending to them. So all nationalized private sector foreign banks, SIDBI extends refinance. It is done based on a percentage of our capital adequacy that we have, the reserves that we have, and it's a normal risk mitigation methodology adopted by all banks when you extend loans, whether it is banks or whether it is corporate or whether it is MSMEs. Coming to the micro sector, it is a sector which we have nurtured. So I take great pride in saying that yes, we are extending the micro sector, microfinance institutions also. It is the need for certain, again, information dissemination that we have set it at BBB. So that's a policy that the bank has taken, and we cannot just extend loan without risk mitigation. So that is the only thing that I would like to say.
Yeah. Coming to this issue of technology, now let's also address issues concerning technology, to which in one of the recent papers by Professor Mehrotra, he has drawn attention towards the extremely low percentage. I remember the number 2.5% is the labor force which has gone through some sort of vocational training, who is part of the manufacturing labor force of our country. Professor Mehrotra, you had suggested some remedial measures in this regard. Can I bring you in here, Professor Mehrotra?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. You can hear me, I hope.
Yeah,
so, so you have the number right. I just want to clarify that in 2011-12, the NSS data tells us that formally trained workers in our workforce were only 2.3%. And remarkably, despite Skill India, we've had several years of Skill India. In the PLFS, the NSS of 2017-18 informed us that share has gone from 2.3% to 2.4%, a 0.1 percentage point increase of the current workforce. Now, I should tell you that this is for the entire workforce. It's true that the share, if you look at only industrial workforce, is actually about 10%, but 10% is formally vocationally trained. So what technology are we talking about? We all know perfectly well that at the lower end of the enterprise structure among MSMEs, they are operating in a low-level equilibrium trap. You know that 84% of our MSMEs are actually own account workers. So we really should be talking only about 16%. But interestingly, what technology are we talking about even for these 16%? Let us just recognize the following facts about the size structure of our enterprises in the country as a whole, which I have a feeling most people are not even aware of. We normally divide our enterprises between organized and unorganized. Among the unorganized, which is where the 66 million enterprises that we were talking about, the 6.6 crores, that number was mentioned. Please note that 70% of these enterprises are unregistered. They are unregistered totally. Only 30% of them are even registered. So suppose the government has a technology upgradation program. Who's it going to reach out to? Anil Bharadwaj in the beginning said that 3 lakh crores, only 7% of the MSMEs have that loan. So you've got that statistic. Now I've given you yet another statistic. If you don't register our enterprises, you don't even know who they are, where they are, what intervention about technology are you going to make? Let me stop there.
Before I bring Samir to the floor with respect to the activities of the Wadhwani group with respect to technology upgradation, and digital hand-holding of small-scale enterprise. May I also request the people who are hearing us to please post in your questions. There's a question and answer session which will follow after the speakers. Samir, the floor is yours. Samir?
Sure. So thanks
Yeah.
for inviting me here, Policy Circle. I appreciate that. So let me just sort of clarify that the role that I'm playing at Wadhwani Foundation in the form of Wadhwani Advantage program that we are playing, it's not just about building a digital capability. I think the key question that we are answering with respect to largely the SMEs are sort of three key questions. The first is, I think the one that we have talked about in terms of demand. We have what we call a Sahayata program, which is a part of the Advantage program. And through this Sahayata program, what we're aiming to do is really helping these SMEs, which are in our analysis in the bucket of, let's say, 2.5 crores sales to 50 crores. The way we believe, based on our analysis, is that we need to strengthen their management capability. So it's just not about digital capability, but about their management capability. If you look at the structure of our MSMEs, you have a very, very large bottom of the pyramid of the MSME structure. It's not going to be viable for India to carry on the suboptimal, inefficient, large population of MSMEs for more than a few years from now, because at the end of the day, we are reaching a stage right now when MSMEs today have hardly about 45 days to 50 days of cash left. And with so much management inability to basically address either the supply side issues or the demand side issues, you are going to carry the capacity which is going to be inefficient. So the way we read the situation is that there is a need, there is a huge need to strengthen those SMEs which have the ability to address the demand that we are talking about. And eventually they gain a sufficient critical mass and size so that they are competitive in the long run. So the role that we are playing is basically ensuring that the SMEs become strengthened in their management capability, are able to look at the demand side issues very closely. And the way to do that is not only technology, and I agree with Professor Mehrotra, is it's not about only technology, it's about our ability to reflect. And this is what we are training the entrepreneurs in terms of how do I ensure that I know how to solve my own problem before I ask for help. And I think that's that fundamental question of training them on how to solve their own problems is exactly what we are doing right now. And that is something that is absolutely needed. So that's the first point. The second point is the way we read the situation is that at this point of time, there has to be alignment between the competitiveness at the micro level and at the macro level. We do not know even today, if you ask a question, that whether this country has got innate ability and competitiveness to excel in certain sectors versus others. It's okay to look at helping everyone, but at the end of the day, your competitiveness of a small enterprise has to be aligned with what the country can really be competitive at. Actually looking at it more realistically as far as that point is concerned. So I think that's the second most important point that I would like to focus on. These are the areas that we are helping MSMEs on.
Yeah, Professor Singh, can I bring in you here, because there's a tendency amidst all management schools and even college going students to go for internship in established brand companies. Can we basically change this towards getting students to intern in some of the small and medium enterprises so that they learn a lot more, far more challenges? In fact, Professor Singh had done some work in this regard during his tenure in Indian Institute of Management. Professor Charan Singh?
Yes. Now,
Yeah.
the issue that has been raised by both Professor Mehrotra and from Wadhwani Association, I've been saying about this now for a couple of years now. Let me take a minute in explaining. The Indian Institute of Management across the country were built from 1970 onwards to produce managers. Managers are those people who have been given an instruction and they have to deliver. The country today produces from about 20 IIMs managers for Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan. Times have changed. Now we don't need managers. We need entrepreneurs who can employ the manager. That's the situation. The point I'm trying to drive home is if the MSMEs and the entrepreneurship is required, do we have a university where we train them in different modules And while I did my research at Peenya in Bangalore and followed it up elsewhere, my own finding is that the mortality rate in the MSME sector is extremely high. Professor Mehrotra is right. 70% of them are not even registered anywhere. And if they are not registered anywhere, you do not even know what the mortality rate is. In Bangalore, I was looking at the weavers. Now they say they are not registered. But when I asked them, you have a 3-point energy electricity plug. So they said, we are registered with the electricity department. So I told them why MSMEs and electricity departments don't speak to each other. The other point, there are 8 critical areas which are responsible for the high mortality rate. One of it is accounting, labor laws, marketing, inputs, HR issues, tax laws. MSMEs are young entrepreneurs, sometimes failed entrepreneurs, sometimes, as Professor Mehrotra was saying, single unit entrepreneurs. Mortality rate is high and nothing can happen. So why not start like an MBA program of 2 years, 8-module university on entrepreneurship? And I'm not talking of rocket science. In 1960s and 70s, we all know what was happening in the agriculture sector. We had to beg the Americans under PL 480 for a shipload of wheat, and that is how our people would be fed. We set up agriculture universities across the country in each state. Why in each state? Because each state had some staple crop to produce. MSMEs produce 6,000 items. Some are typical to a typical state. There is Kolhapuri chappal, there is Jaipuri rajai, there is something in South, something in Punjab. If we have MSME university, which trains the entrepreneurs, has 8 modules where a young man is taught how to handle the marketing, how to accounting, labor laws, HR issues, you will find the mortality rate goes down. MSMEs become very progressive. The last point I want to make is, when we talk of in the COVID times and COVID 18 months, if it is going to come in waves or at least a year before we recover fully, if we are talking about the COVID times, we will have to think of future. My own reading is the country has enough talent in young people who migrate from their villages and local areas and come to urban areas to become guards in buildings or headload workers. Now, when SIDBI and NABARD actively involved, small amount of money, 10,000 rupees to an artisan, 10,000 rupees to a small sculpture, instead of importing statues from China, these guys can produce it within India with little amount of money, and they'll be self-employed, no need of high-tech technology, and they'll employ others. So my reading is, we need to rethink our MSME strategy. We have to think at various levels. At one level, to ensure better survival rate the university. At the other end, to employ people, keep them engaged so that social unrest doesn't take place. Migrant labor which has gone back to their villages, little amount of money, and tell them the qualities, the skills that you have in your hands, weaving, sculpturing, or anything. Here is small amount of money. You engage one more person, start producing, and marketing starts taking place. We will have to rethink our MSME strategy now onwards.
Amidst all the policy suggestions which has been made by the government, the MSMEs themselves have been highly dissatisfied with some set of suggestions. For example, the Chamber of Small Industry Association has already raised some severe objections towards the decriminalization of the bouncing of checks, which has been announced as part of the package. Can I have Raghu here to comment on the same? Raghu?
Yeah. Krishna,
Yes,
rephrase your question.
That is, there has been steps like the decriminalization of the bouncing.
No, okay. See, as far as Krishna, as far as the decriminalization is concerned, it is now only they have sought the views of the stakeholders. But in my own view, let's take the IBC for that matter, where the threshold was increased from 1 lakh to 1 crore.
Yeah.
Now, what does it mean? Most of the micro enterprises are supposed to receive only up to 1 crore money from the corporates. They used to use this IVC as a threat to recover their payments. Now suddenly that 1 lakh has gone up to 1 crore.
1 crore.
No, but there is no option for given to the people below 1 crore. Where will they go? Similarly, if tomorrow the courts feel too many cases are pending, therefore let FIRs not be registered by the police stations, will that be a right justification? It's not a right justification. So decriminalization is not the right option. For example, I'm telling you, the check bouncing.
It might even affect the payment settlement mechanism in the country.
No. We normally, Krishna, when I go and buy the material from an unknown party supplier, we give a post-dated check. And same way, when I deal with a customer who is unknown to me, I will take a post-dated check. This post-dated check is a very accepted norm of doing business day to day by micro and small enterprises, largely. And now there used to be a fear when we sign the check, post-dated check, because it is punishable. Today, if you decriminalize it, nobody will accept the check from me. Now they will say, give me a bank guarantee. Give me the money on the table upfront and then take the material. The very trust and faith of day-to-day business will be lost now. These are all my concerns and worries. The decriminalization or policy changes, take for that matter the reclassification of MSME. Now, today, a person who is doing a turnover of 10 lakhs a year is on par with a person doing 250 crore a year turnover as an MSME. How is it possible? How can you have
the range of turnover has been expanded widely. That might be the larger set might corner a large proportion of the total credit.
No, not only that, Krishna, but accepting now 5,000 companies, rest all have become now MSME. So it is high time then we call non-MSME companies as an entity rather than MSME as an entity.
Raghu, once again, for the benefit of all the audience, we repeat that other than just 5,000 companies, all companies in our country, by virtue of the new classification, have become MSMEs.
Absolutely right. And so secondly, a person, let's take an IT company, they don't have an investment in plant and machinery, and they don't have a starting time for doing turnover, and they don't have a blue collar and a migrant laborers for workforce. Whereas a manufacturing industry, we invest, we ramp up our production capacity 30%, 40%, 100%. We reach after 5 years and 6 years of our whole turnover. And secondly,
Raghu, under the new classification, I think the difference between manufacturing and services has also been just changed. It is no more there.
That is why I am saying
it complicates issue and tilts the terms of trade against undertaking manufacturing investments, because easy money would actually be made in services.
So that is why we have been saying, anyway, you have decided to declassify, at least reclassify into manufacturing, service, export, and trading. Yeah. Trading is another area which can also be included in this. So why not we now itself bifurcate? So that tomorrow, if we want to do any study or if we want to extend any facility or a policy to individuals,
may also bring Anil Bharadwaj here, whose organization was in the forefront asking for procurement from small and medium enterprise. Already he has expressed his disillusionment that, it has been an open tender and anybody can basically make the claim. But I would like to ask Tom Kim one more question as to, have they basically got the pending payments which they had to get from the state and the central governments? Is there any response from the small scale industries favorably like that? Mr. Anil Bharadwaj?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, let me take this question of public procurement. This is extremely important issue. First of all, we have been discussing that there have been supply side addressing through several measures, but at the same time, government has to do something about the demand side, and this is rightly so. In my opinion, public procurement could be a very powerful tool, a lever to create demand. Let's understand that in India, it is estimated by CUTS and by other institutions that approximately $1 trillion worth of goods and services are procured from municipality to central government, which is almost 1/3 of India's GDP. This is huge. Now, it becomes even more important for the sake of MSMEs because at least in the central government, we have 25% set aside for the micro and small enterprises. Medium are excluded. I mean, then this is a huge amount. So first of all, it is important for us, number one, that it is one instrument that is not constrained by the provisions of the WTO. India is not a signatory to plurilateral agreement in WTO, which means that we can create such rules that can favor an industry, and thereby we can create demand by spending in India. Three, apart from creating demand, because a lot of PSUs have money, a lot of central government institutions, for example, or agencies like railways. Railways is a huge buyer. They have the budget. They don't have problem of cash. They have already budget sorted out. So the only question is that their traction or their delivery of funds to the customer, to the final supplier, takes quite a long time. And an institutional mechanism was created by ex-RBI governor in the form of trades platform. Now, if public procurement and trades platforms are joined together, we can do two remarkable things for the MSMEs. Number one, we can create demand, and two, we can create liquidity through trades. Currently, most of the PSUs are still shying away from trades. Almost all state-level public sector undertakings and huge buyers like state electricity boards are not registered there. Even institutions like railways and defense are not there. So I see public procurement, as Kabir would have said, ek sadhe sab sadhe. I mean, if we just focus one public procurement issue rightly, we can create not only demand, but as well as liquidity for the MSME sector.
Yeah, I think we should now enter into a round where everyone gives a response for 2 minutes about the overall future which they see about the MSMEs. Towards setting the ball rolling, I would just put forward something like this, that in the context of the pandemic, when in fact the global value chain of production was ruptured, for the first ever time, we started thinking seriously after many years about a self-reliant strategy with respect to MSMEs. Even at least a little bit of rhetoric at least is there in the air. Till time, we were basically thinking in terms of these small and medium enterprises being nurtured as part of the global value chain. So if we put a title like MSMEs with the global value chain or without it, what should be the medium to long-term strategies of our country? Let me give the floor open to everyone for 2 minutes each, after which we will have a Q&A, so people can actually give in the Q&As. Anil, possibly you yourself could start. Anil.
Anil, you have to unmute yourself. Anil Bharadwaj.
He's not. Okay, Professor Mehrotra, why don't you yourself start so that
there are two Anils here. I thought that you are talking to Anil Nair.
No, Anil Nair is in the audience. He cannot speak now. He can speak only in the question and answer. Yes, Anil Bharadwaj. Anil Bharadwaj. Yes, Anil.
Okay. Now, global value chains is, I think, a very, very complex and very important issue. And I think this is true that during the COVID period or during this crisis, a lot of transformation is taking place in global value chains. Some of them are being uprooted from China and are getting settled in Vietnam, Indonesia, and other parts of the Southeast Asia and East Asia. So far, as a country, we haven't done anything or demonstrated our seriousness to attract them to India. We have, as a matter of fact, not only we have not done anything, but we have somehow created an atmosphere that foreign investment is not very welcome, and it may like to create conditions in what would be manufactured, and then there would be some kind of a Swadeshi movement, which could be termed as giving more support to domestic companies than the foreign companies. I mean, these are somehow two very different kind of goals, attracting GVCs and having a protectionist trade regime is chalk and cheese. It won't work. This is what I feel. So we have to decide actually that what we would like to have. If you like to attract GVCs, we'll have to open up tremendously all our trade policy, our banking system, our labor laws. There are a lot of reforms that we'll have to do to really attract them. I think we are still very, very far away. We are not in the top 10 list of I can say potential places where the GVCs would like to go. India would perhaps be beyond 10. I don't think that they are. We are still in the game.
Samir Sate.
Sure. So a couple of things. One is I think we need to decide as a country what is it that we want to focus on. I do believe that there is going to be tremendous resource constraint going forward. Everybody's monetary situation is becoming tighter. It's very clear to me that at the end of the day, if we don't decide that country has to excel in these 5 things, 10 things, we will land up actually doing disservice to most of the sectors. So for me, it's very important to look at the government actually prioritizing certain areas where the competitiveness should be global, not only Indian, because at the end of the day, the phase that we will go through right now, as you can see, from globalization to now, everybody's looking at some areas of protectionism. And from our own forecast that we have made, you are going to see contraction of our demand anywhere between 15% to 40%, depending on the sector. Now, in this situation in 2020, the remainder of 2020, 21, and the first 6 months of 2022, I think we have to get our act right in terms of where is it that you need to allocate your resources. Just by spreading resources to everywhere is not going to help. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say, the management capability that I referred to earlier has to start from grassroots level. It can't be lopsided about only large corporates or only medium-sized corporates. I think the MSMEs have to build significant management capability in terms of entrepreneurs being trained in the way they have to think about growth and scale. That's very important. And the last thing that I want to focus on is really ability to really look at integrating the labor force that is there and skilling them significantly, because of
over to you, Chitra LA from Sydney. Chitra, madam.
I would like to put it into 2 different things. One is the short term and one is the long term vision. I think many of the ideas that we are talking about of global competitiveness, skilling, all these appear to be, to me, at this juncture, a bit longer term, which we need to look in, no doubt. But having said that, I would like to, I think Mr. Raghunathan was talking about, receivables. See, he's an entrepreneur going through challenges now. And that is where we need to come in. And I would have been very happy if somebody had articulated as to why TREADS is not picking up. What was the rule that was told by the government to the PSUs or the government departments that they should mandatorily register on the TREADS? I'm talking of immediate receivable problem for the MSMEs. I'm not talking long term at all. And why couldn't we come out with a mandatory discounting process on the TREADS instead of restricting itself only to registration on the TREADS? This is a question which I have been asking, I think, every possible government official. I say, why don't you make that mandatory? Because then compulsorily the railways, compulsorily the, any defense, everybody would be forced to discount through that. So why is it that is not happening? Yes, Raghunathan sir, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, Raghunathan.
I just wanted to tell you, madam, the relationship between an entrepreneur and the buyer is like a husband and wife. We will have fight, we will have give and takes. Only on the day when I decide I am not going to live with him anymore, I will file my divorce papers. The going to the third party and filing a redressal system, whether it is with the government or with anybody for that matter, is my last resort. And 90% of the time, I file it only when I decide not to do further business with them. Otherwise, we manage on a daily basis. We cry, we report, we fall at the feet. He will request. That's the way the life goes on. So that is the reason why, in fact, I told the finance minister when she talked about the dues is only 10,000 crore, 15,000 crore as per the Samadhan portal. I said Samadhan portal is like a court record of how many divorces are filed. Fine, somebody goes and files it in Samadhan only when we decide to break away from the consumer. So that's a part of the life. What is more important, I exactly like what you said. Every company should be mandated to give an aging statement of sundry creditors on their portals. And if I find my name is wrong there, or if my bills are not clear, then I should have a secret mechanism in which I communicate to the government
Yes.
that my bill is missing there, not knowing with the knowledge of my buyer. But without the knowledge of my buyer, I should be able to take it over with them. And they can write to him saying that we have received complaints that we are not paying on time. Why are you doing it? Some scrutiny, some punishment system.
Mechanism like
That is possible.
Yes, over to you, Professor Charan Singh, because we are running short of time. Professor Charan Singh.
Yeah, means I think this is a great opportunity, COVID. I think the foreign companies need to be invited to India, as other countries are giving them huge amount of concessions. As China does it, this is no rocket science. We all know what are the type of concessions given. We should get them to India. As far as the MSMEs are concerned, I'm looking at a two-way relationship. I think with what has happened in COVID and India's natural heritage, the herbal medicine is going to become far more important. We need to identify sectors where MSMEs can play a prominent role. Herbal medicine is one. And to promote herbal medicine, the same foreign companies who will be brought into India and who can be given incentives to come and invest in India, maybe something like export processing zones for these companies. These companies can also help us in marketing India's products, which MSMEs can produce in large quantity. One of it, of course, I'm saying is herbs. The other is our own handicrafts are extremely important. I've stayed abroad. I know how important and how valuable handicrafts and skill of the Indian weavers is taken into account. We can market those. On the other hand, we still have something important to offer to the world. Post-COVID, I think health concerns are going to change. And therefore, our hilly regions, especially combining yoga and the open areas in Joshimath, Hemkund, Badrinath, above Hardwar and other places in Northeast should be developed. And MSMEs of all types can benefit when we get the international tourism only on health to come here, not medicines, not surgery, not dentistry, but just healthy living. So I think there's lots of scope post-COVID. We need to plan together and MSMEs can benefit from it.
Yes. Over to you, Professor Santosh Mehrotra, who of course has been blending ideas of MSMEs with labor, with skills and with livelihoods. Professor Mehrotra.
First of all, I want to emphasize that Anil Bharadwaj and Raghu both made a lot of sense, and they made a series of suggestions, and honestly, those need to be put together and pushed much harder in the media and in the government. On the GVC issue, you know, I think this your last question, Krishna, is really about the medium to long run, and and that's what I'm going to address, and I'm going to make only 4 points. One, I think we are living in cloud cuckoo land if we are thinking that suddenly, you know, we are going to become member of a whole series of GPNs and GVCs. You know, it hasn't happened in the last 20 years because there are very serious constraints. If those constraints were not there, even if we were to give some benefits, they are not going to be very excited or enthusiastic. Let me just, you know, mention in this context that we have been attempting to build 5 industrial and infrastructure corridors, sort of along the lines of the quadrilateral, the Golden Quadrilateral. You know what I'm talking about. The most recent one is the VCIC, the Vizag-Chennai Industrial Corridor, which is 70% funded by the Asian Development Bank, 30% by the central government, and the 2 state governments are promoting this are Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu, and they are well-governed, relatively well-governed states, and they are thinking seriously about using this opportunity to engage in GVICs. And I think we should really focus our attention on these coastal states which have strong governance. Please don't expect that along the Delhi Kolkata corridor, you are in UP, Bihar, you're going to suddenly have industries coming up. Let's not kid ourselves. Let me make 3 other points. Firstly, you see these GBIs, these industrial corridors have to be part of a strategy which is called an industrial policy, a manufacturing strategy. In the 30 years that have elapsed since 1991 that our economic reforms began, we have not had a manufacturing strategy. All the East stations built their GVCs as part of a national manufacturing strategy. All East stations, including China. So we first have to decide that we have to have a manufacturing strategy. This is the main reason why in the 30 years, the share of manufacturing in GDP is still 17 to 18%. Point 1. Point 2, part of that manufacturing strategy has to be a focus on one, labor-intensive manufacturing. That means to effectively benefit the MSMEs. And secondly, a focus on cluster development program, because we have 5,500 clusters across the country of manufacturing centers, which are dominated by MSMEs. So if we had a more coherent cluster development program, which is much better funded, if our skill development institutions were increasingly now located near where the clusters are, because that's where the jobs are, and that's where the employers are located. So in other words, you will get a demand-based skill development program as opposed to a government-driven, government-financed, government-managed, supply-driven program. So I won't say more because you have limited time. Secondly, a focus on labor-intensive manufacturing. Would you believe this? That in the period between 2012 and 2018, manufacturing has grown so slowly that manufacturing employment has fallen for the first time in India's history by 3 million in a 6-year period. Manufacturing employment fell, and which were the sufferers? The 5 sectors which account for most of those, and most of those are dominated by the MSMEs. What? Food processing, leather and footwear, textiles, garments, and wood and furniture. These account for 50% of labor of our manufacturing employment. And these are dominated by, because they are labor intensive, they tend to be dominated by them. We need packages for each one of these sectors. And we don't, at the same time, and I'm going to finish with this, Krishna, at the same time, let us not do anything to undermine. For instance, a package was given for textiles garments about 4 years ago. And that same year, the demonetization came along. That destroyed that package. Secondly, a package was given in 2017 for the leather industry. But sure enough, leather is being destroyed by the cow slaughter ban. So let us not, on the one hand, give, on the other hand, take away. Thank you very much.
There is this question by Rajesh Dubey to Ms. Chitra. Can Rajesh Dubey himself announce a question? Rajesh Dubey from the floor. Can I read it out? Till the time fiscal support increases for MSMEs, what is SIDBI doing to convince banks, maybe even through Government of India and RBI, that unless banks are liberal in providing quasi-equity or loans at much lower interest rate, the existential question for MSMEs would loom large. Consequently, the cascade effect on banks would also be high. Don't you agree that this is the beginning of a colossal financial crisis? Chitra, Madam Chitra, a question for you. Hello, Madam Chitra is there? I think her connection is not there. I think, yeah. Sandeep, yes, yeah. Sandeep Pravatikar, can you read out your question? Yes, Chitra. Madam Chitra is there, I think. Chitra? Yes, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Please.
And can you please repeat the question? I'm having a problem with.
No, you can also read your question and answer. I just read it again. Rajesh Dubey had written another question that TREDS should be made compulsory for all. Agree with Chitra Ally in this. All transactions should be compulsorily routed through the TREDS. The track record information should be made available for credit bureaus. But this is just a suggestion. But he had a question earlier where he was trying to say that if the interest rates were not very hugely reduced, and if the banks are not ready to provide equity, some part of quasi equity and loans at much lower interest rates, the banks are all going to witness a colossal financial crisis. Do you agree? Chitra Ally. A question to Chitra Ally. Yes. I think again we have lost contact with her or what? Professor Mehrotra, you have also a question here. This is from Anjali Tandon. With the revised definition of MSMEs that comes into effect on 1st July, the number of MSMEs will go up. Does this not crowd in further? Consequently, the micro enterprises will be under severe stress as the new entrants would actually would be the middle at the top and better placed. What are your views to support the micro enterprises in particular?
I think both Raghu and Anil have actually answered that question.
Yes,
and what I think what she means is that the micros will be crowded out, not
crowded, not crowded in, crowded out.
No, they will be crowded out. And well, that's all. That I think is fairly straightforward. So honestly, what I think there are a few things that can be said in this regard. You see, we've had for some time now the PSL, the priority sector lending, right? Now, I think one committee I remember the RBI had proposed that there should be a sub sort of priority given micros. That could be considered. Point one. Point two, you know, when this priority sector lending limit is never reached, rarely reached, why can't the money be actually made available to SIDBI to lend? That's a second suggestion. You know, there could be other such ideas that need to be considered, because honestly, credit is one of the most serious problems, or the shortage of credit is one of the serious problems that most MSMEs face. But I should also add in closing to say that, you know, I think MSMEs will really help themselves, and the government needs to help MSMEs to help themselves in this regard if they were to register. But that requires, and I've done some research on this in the Asia context, that, you know, that requires that governments actually make it worthwhile for MSMEs to register, because then they begin to feel that, okay, if I'm going to become registered, and everyone has, you know, is registered on a simple basis of using a PAN card, but then they are financially actually helped instantaneously almost after they register. In other words, they see as an incentive to register. Otherwise, why should they register? They are under the radar, and at the same time they you know, borrow from, you know, NBFCs or here and there, and they manage somehow. This is what I began by saying is a low-level equilibrium trap.
Yeah, Subhash Shashidharan has a question here to Chitra Ally again with respect to how can our MSMEs be competitive when the cost of capital is between 10 to 14%? Will the consumer be ready to spend more for the goods which are being produced and manufactured there? Chitra, are you there? Chitra Ally, are you hearing this question? Yeah, I think, okay, then I think then we should call up, because the other questions looks like more of suggestions and comments. And it was a great session having you here, Professor Mehrotra. Thank you so much. And also, Professor.
Actually, I wanted to make a couple of points, if you allow me to.
Yes, Anil Bhardwaj.
Very, very quickly, 3 points. One, So far as trades are concerned, there is already since 2018 a mandatory provision that all companies above 500 crore rupees turnover are bound to enlist themselves. And it is only after this provision has been kicked in that suddenly there has been a lot of traction seen on the trades platform. And it might, if COVID would not have happened, by 31st of March, we might have seen a cumulative turnover of around 25,000 crore. Secondly, with regards to the recent question that was posed on turnover, see, I would like to say a couple of things. Number one, priority sector lending has been, I mean, both micro, small, and medium enterprises were covered under priority sector lending even before this current definition. And this happened somewhere, I think, in 2016 or so. That was a bad decision. And that would have already crowded out quite a number of micro enterprises. I think it's time that it could have been reversed. Medium enterprises really don't need that kind of protection or directed lending that is required in the case of micro enterprises. But at the same time, one of the most important deliverable under the MSMEs is for the public procurement. And for public procurement, medium enterprises are excluded already. So they are not part of it. The point I'm trying to make is that change of this definition has not materially changed anything on the ground, which was not there earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. We thank all the participants who have come to this
Excuse me, Krishna.
Yes,
Krishna.
yes. Yeah, you have also query. Yes.
No, Madam Chitra is now back with us, and whatever the question somebody asks, you can pose it to her.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
She is very much here.
Yeah. Okay. Madam Chitra, are you there? Hello. I think she's not able to hear us. So
I'm having problem with my connectivity here.
But I can just read it out slowly to you. One question.
It will just get disconnected. The broadband is getting, problematic.
But in case you are able to get now, this is the question which has been posed by one of the participants here, who has asked that in case the banks are not ready to go for low cost interest rates, and number two, in case they are not ready to take quasi equity in the different firms, don't you think that we are actually staring at a new financial crisis of sorts amidst the banks? In case this sort of lending happens at the current situation, when the expected returns are very low, don't you think that we are staring at a new financial crisis? That's question number one. The second question is, given that the cost of credit of MSME is 10 to 14%, how would these MSMEs be able to competitively sell and create profits? Hello. Yeah, I think then we should just think of, we'll just wind up this particular session. Thanks for participating in this particular session, and thanks to policycircle.org for hosting this particular program, which is extremely significant and important with respect to the future of MSMEs in our country. And thank you, professors there, Professor Charan Singh, Mr. Anil Bhardwaj, Mr. K. Raghunathan, Professor Santosh Mehrotra, Ms. Chitra L.I., Samir Sate, as well as, am I missing out on someone? I think I've already named everyone. Yeah. Thank you so much. And there are a number of people in our audience for this webinar and who have been continuing to be with us for some time, and even participating in the question and answer sessions. And thank you so much for the rich information which all of you provided. It was a great learning exercise. And thank you, Policy Circle, for having hosted this particular seminar. Okay.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening. Keep health.
Thank you, friends, and
thank you also,
see you again.
Also the technical staff who have been extraordinarily helpful to the conduct of this particular program. Thank you so much.